Stark's greatest teams. The NFL said the Browns were doomed immigrants from a Bush league. Paul Brown quietly smiled while his quarterback lugged all the way to an NFL championship. Steve Duershuk, CantonRep.com sports writer at Duershuk. Actually, this is the Browns' second expansion era. They were part of an expansion that left the NFL with 13 teams in 1950. This was more than 4 decades before the Browns' disappearance and rebirth as the expansion team that opens the 19th season of the painstaking new era today against Pittsburgh. When the Browns joined the NFL in 1950, they had already played 4 seasons in the All-America Football Conference, with astonishing results. They lost only 3 of 59 games. They won all 4 AAFC League championships before the league folded, its demise partly the result of no one keeping up with the Browns. At first in 1950, it seemed the Browns were jumping from the AAFC to the AFC Arrogant Football Conference. NFL patriarch George Halas was a part of a crowd that had dismissed the AAFC as a Bush league. The Browns winning an NFL championship in their first season was a surprise, on par with the Columbus Clippers whipping the Chicago Cubs in the 2016 World Series. Cleveland's coach Paul Brown responded with a quiet, salty confidence as he approached the 1950 opener against defending NFL champ Philadelphia. Alluding to the Eagles' star ball carrier, Brown sent his players onto the field with this message: just think, in a few minutes you'll actually be allowed to touch Steve Van Buren. The tables turned. Van Buren didn't play. Philadelphia couldn't touch the Browns. From the time we beat the Eagles 3,510, Brown wrote in his 1979 autobiography, the entire 1950 season became a tremendous experience, and it touched every facet of my life. The Browns' 2 celebrities as they made the transition into the NFL were the coach, Brown, and the quarterback, Otto Graham. Graham stirred things up at the Washington, D.C. Touchdown Club banquet on January 8, 1950, 30 days after the announcement that the AAFC was folding, with its Cleveland, San Francisco and Baltimore franchises joining the NFL. The swanky affair at the Statler Hotel included a presentation to former Canton Bulldogs icon Jim Thorpe, who accepted the All-Time American Award. From the podium, Graham and Washington Redskins owner George Preston Marshall took turns needling each other. Marshall basically dismissed the Browns in public. Graham punched back. The AAFC isn't defunct, Graham told the crowd. We simply absorbed the NFL. As spring arrived, Graham imagined his workaholic coach holed up in his office drawing up plays, coming out only to think them over while he walked his Boston Terrier. The opener arrived. The Eagles had outscored their 1949 NFL victims 378,134. A supposed prediction by NFL Commissioner Bert Bell made the rounds in the Cleveland locker room. Cleveland would be lucky to win 3 games. The Browns actually provoked hostility. On the cover of their 1949 press guide, they called themselves the world's best football team. The Browns' 1950 preseason was a grand tour of Ohio, with practice games in Toledo's Glass Bowl, Cincinnati's Nippert Stadium and Akron's Rubber Bowl. They finally played in Cleveland's Municipal Stadium against Halas' loaded Chicago Bears. A crowd of 51,076 watched a 2,723 Cleveland win. Brown was a master of multiple disciplines, including psychology, and he played the disrespectful publicity like a Stradivarius. By the time the Saturday night opener against Philadelphia arrived, as Graham recalled, we would have played for a milkshake. In front of a crowd of 71,237, the Eagles took a quick 30 lead. Graham then carried out the plan of completing a series of short completions to Dub Jones and Dante Lavelli. The idea was to frustrate cornerback Russ Kraft into jumping short routes. In the huddle, Jones winked at Graham and said, "He's ready." Jones feigned a quick out while Graham pump faked. When Kraft came up, Graham said, "Dub cut down the sideline. I simply floated a long pass he could run under, a 59-yard touchdown. That was our first regular season touchdown in the NFL. We were off to the races." Fullback Marion Motley touched the ball 13 times and gained 74 yards. Lavelli, Jones and Max Beede evenly divided 16 catches that produced most of Graham's 346 passing yards. Cleveland's defense frazzled quarterback Tommy Thompson into an 8 of 24 passing day. Philadelphia coach Greasy Neal had played for the pro Canton Bulldogs in 1917 and for the pro Massillon Tigers in 1919, at about the time a schoolboy named Paul Brown moved with his family to Massillon. All Neil could say at first after facing the all-grown-up Brown was, "Geez, they've got a lot of guns." Neil became Brown's friend and Graham's admirer. "I never saw a guy hang 'em out there the way Graham does," Neil said. "Anyone who can put the ball up there for a guy to catch a yard before stepping out of bounds, or put it right in the receiver's hands at the moment the defender is beaten, is great." The Browns went on to a 102 regular season while working through their NFL initiation. They had been masters of discipline in the AAFC, but the NFL littered them with flags. Nearly 1,000 yards were walked off on 104 penalties against Cleveland. Opponents were penalized 62 times for 554 yards. Browns' roster included a league-high 5 black players in an era when some teams had none. One was star defensive end Len Ford. In his autobiography, Brown said the only real heartache of the 1950 season came against the Chicago Cardinals. Len was a tremendous pass rusher, and he had been running over the Cardinal blocks, Brown wrote. Jim Conzelman, their coach, ordered Pat Harder, a fullback, to help with the pass blocking, and Len began running over him, too. Harder had tried every way within the rules to stop him, without success, so, on one play, as Ford got around him, he swung an elbow and hit him in the cheekbone, which crushed the side of his face. There were no face bars on helmets then. It scarred Len for the rest of his life. What made it worse was that Ford, not Harder, was ejected because the officials claimed he had flagrantly used his hands. When we looked at the films, we saw that everything Ford had done was clean. Ford was idled for much of the season but suited up in the championship game against the Rams. He played magnificently, Brown wrote, even though he had lost 20 pounds because of the injury. The Browns had a distinctive chemistry. Offensive linemen Frank Gatsky, Chubby Grigg and Abe Gibron were part of the Filthy Five, buddies who never allowed their practice jerseys to be washed. During a 1991 interview, a few months before his death, Brown told us the arch-rival, for him, was the New York Giants. That was the team that handed the 1950 Browns their only 2 losses, 60 in the home opener and 17-13 at Yankee Stadium. The Browns and Giants both went 102 in the regular season, forcing a playoff game to determine the American Conference champ. It was the same story in the National Conference, with 293 teams, the Rams and Bears, colliding in an elimination game. The Giants were heavy favorites, Graham wrote in the book Automatic. Benedictine and Street. Ignatius had played a high school game at the stadium the week before, and the turf froze before the ruts could be repaired. Most of the Browns and Giants wore Converse All-Stars. I rushed for 70 yards in my Chucks, more than we gained in the air. Cleveland won a weird 83 slugfest. Middle guard Bill Willis had what Brown called the greatest game of his life. The Browns led 30 in the fourth quarter when Giants speedster Tutu Roberts broke away. It looked like a 53-yard touchdown run before Willis came out of nowhere to catch him from behind. Lou Groza kicked a field goal with a minute left, and Willis tackled quarterback Charlie Connolly in the end zone for a safety on the game's final play. Still to come was the championship game against the Rams, a last-second victory by the Browns. Years later, Brown would call it the greatest game he ever saw. See related story. Reach Steve at 3,305,808,347 or stev.duashuk@cantoonrep.com and Twitter at @SDurShukRep.